I'm excited to introduce Quinton Maldonado. Quinton is a Western alum from the photo program. Got their master's from Tyler in Pennsylvania. I don't know why I say it with a
Yes.
question. And then now is living and working in New York City. Take it away, Quinton.
Okay. Can I share my screen?
I
Is
haven't
that
made. I have made it so. Yes.
wonderful? Thank you. I want to share this. Okay. Are we all seeing my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Beautiful. Okay. So, oops. Jumping ahead of myself. Hello. I'm Quentin. Dana and I go way back to Western days where I got my BFA in photography. Also did a lot of printmaking while there. It's okay. And getting interested in glitch art and things that really helped, I don't know, shape or orient my relationship to photography that changes and becomes installation and video. And I'm going to get into that work later. I came out here to the East Coast for grad school. I went to grad school at Tyler School of Art in the photography program. Now I'm up here living in New York City, which I love. New York is wonderful. I do miss Philly though. Also, just so beautiful. But to go, I guess the story begins back in time because this is a photography class. Whoops. Want to talk a little bit about my photographic process or my relationship to photography in two parts. And first being portraiture, and portraiture sort of being one of the things that really got me to fall in love with photography as this act of expression, an expression not just being or not just meaning like myself, but also a type of interaction between myself as the photographer and the models that I was using and the lights, the mediums of photography that I was using in the studio. Uh, and I remember reading it's from one of the art critics, I believe from The Nation, who talks about Renaissance portraiture. And he says that, like, in Renaissance portraiture, the thing that changes in comparison to earlier forms is you get the sense that you are standing with somebody or across from them. And that is this kind of interaction between the gaze of the viewer, but also this acknowledgement in which having people look at the camera or away from the camera, these types of interactions that give us this like entry into the world of this person or what we assume or imagine, that kind of like expanded space on the other side of the print could be. And so I always really loved that about portraiture. And I got started doing 35 millimeter, but when I was at Western, I had the opportunity to shoot a lot of 4x5, which this is a 4x5 print here. And that process of looking through the ground glass and just being able to like be with the model or the person that you were across from, I think is like one of the most interesting parts to me. There's always this like negotiation that is happening. And I think for me, shooting in the studio is really nice. The reduction, it like hones in uh, on a person in this way that I think it's it feels like a good studio portrait to me is something that makes you feel like you're there with them uh, in that like Renaissance kind of way. And oops. uh, and so I think that's always what I'm trying to capture when I'm in the studio. And I love using 35 millimeter now in the to capture people because I just think that it looks there's a weight to everything that I don't feel whenever I'm using digital cameras. And maybe I'm just bad with digital and not using the right ones, but I don't know. There's this permanence, I think, that also gets transferred through the utilization of film uh, that's more, I don't know what the word is, maybe respectful to our images, our, like we live in a world now that is so saturated with social media images of ourselves that our relationship to what that is, like our own image, gets so desacralized and it becomes this purely immediate communicative expression rather than an actual person. It is only just like carrying a flattened message rather than exploring that depth that exists beyond the plane. But we'll get back to that. So next, I want to talk a
From
little bit
that
about architecture.
from that to this, from a flattened message to this is fantastic.
I know. So yeah, so thinking a lot about architecture. I mean, being a you know photography uh, photo boy of some kind, there's a type of like I don't know the way in which architecture, especially modern architecture, and the rise of modern photography, especially in like architectural photo in the 60s and 70s, all the way up to today in a lot of instances, expresses this kind of like the strictness of the grid, but also like geometry and built space, but also the camera compresses everything in these ways that expose a kind of coldness or a reduced world. It's very frictionless. Uh, so I think that my architectural photography is always like hewed towards that thing that I was seeing, but it's hard to express the kind of psychic alienation that is put out by so much of the built environment, like these architectural forms that exist to facilitate like the flow of capital and not so much actually be felt like lived in spaces. Um, there's a kind of loneliness to them, like maybe an anxiety. Um, and so this is another thing that I love about 35 millimeter is that it really became this way of like uh, unchaining like the strict eye that the architectural photo kind of like masters, quote unquote, uh, get a lot of like oohs and ahs from is that rationality of the 4x5 or the view camera, and it can structure and make strict the world. Uh, but there's also this like romanticism to the giant negative and like capturing everything. And 35 millimeter offers us this way to kind of like zoom around from all different angles and uh, capture the world both inside of the frame, but with like an activity that I think is very interesting. And so, and I think a lot of the architectural, even though I do make these kind of like minimalistic architectural photos, uh, light is always such a thing that like guides my kind of my eye, as well as like wandering through hallways. I think that that's always a good task, is that stumbling upon something that is like so mundane or so it is just a channel. And then there's this sort of inspiration of uniqueness that can be brought about by just seeing it a little bit different. And so, okay, so that's the photography section. How am I doing on time? I'm not meandering too much, hopefully.
No, no, no. This is good. Yeah, thank you. I really like the psychic alienation that facilitates the flow of capital.
Mm-hmm. It's bad news. It's bad stuff.
I have questions, and I think I've asked you before, but I have questions about how your portraits reconcile with your architectural work. But is that kind of spoken to in the installation works? Like, is now a good time to ask that question, or should I wait?
I think it's a fair question. It's like, because I do think that they come from like, in a weird way, like the same place, but from like the opposite sides. Uh,
Yeah, talk about that
so,
relationship a little bit, maybe especially as like Spencer's looking at dealing with like conceptual work. Um,
mhm.
yeah,
uh, yeah. So I guess to me, um, you know, I try and be a good like dialectical thinker when it comes to uh, my art and work, and thinking, because we oftentimes like we can tunnel vision down like a kind of proper way for ourselves, and things that don't fit inside the box of like what we think is our art can feel uh, they can be difficult to reconcile, even though they all come from us. Um, and so to me, I think exploring issues or ideas, concepts through uh, like process that takes you in both directions is really important. Uh, like range, uh, both conceptually and uh, like technically, are incredibly important. I think the last time that I was talking to your class, I was talking about Catherine Opie, who I think is one of the best photographers out there, who has such an incredible ability to photograph at scale, both like a interpersonal humanity, but also these like epic kind of landscapes and concepts come through in different elements of her work. And so there are many other artists that also go down this path. So many works now are interdisciplinary or have these mixed media, multimedia elements in them. So pushing yourself where you feel comfortable first, I think for me, and that was shifts between different styles of photographies, different mediums, like working within it and then working out of it has been a really important part of my process, because then all of a sudden I see that I was always doing the same thing, or that I've just been making one artwork, but it just comes out a little bit different each time.
Yeah, it's funny. I think the first time I saw your presentation, I was thinking like, man, these portrait works are awesome, but they're so different than an architecture work. But they are really connected on like a single trajectory, and one's just looking this way and one's looking this way. We have like, again, the psychic alienation that facilitates the flow of capital on one end of the spectrum, and then the other end, it's like, I want to be in a room with someone. That's like this is about loneliness, and then this is about like relationship. Yeah, that's the kind of the first time it hit me how unified those two bodies really are.
I mean, it didn't come to me until recently, not until having to think it through again.
Nice. Yeah, thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt for so long.
Oh, no, no worries. I got rolling on that one. So, going to talk about installation work. And so, this first image is an installation. This was the first one that I did back in a house venue that is no longer existent in Bellingham. And I think that this piece just taught me so many different things. It was one of the first ones that I had a full, um, like a total art experience in mind, thinking everything down from the sound to the atmosphere to the light, positions of the chairs, like uh, each element I really wanted to make fully considered, because, and I think that this is a problem that has to be reckoned with when you're making an installation as well, as that uh, part of the trick of installations is to make people feel like it's almost like it's sprung out of the room itself, like a naturalist kind of, or a natural relationship that kind of flows between the audience and this kind of spectacleized, like, whole space or holistic experience. Um, and that is, on the one hand, I think, such an important part of making a good installation, is being so um, attentive. But there is also the contradiction that exists in that, is that the more that you try and totalize and absolutely control that experience, the more dictatorial and actually not open the experience is. Uh, and this is a thing that I've been slowly but surely trying to come to recognition inside of my work. This one was one of the first installations that I did when I was in Tyler, and my goal was just to get people to walk around in a circle. That's been a big theme for my installation pieces, because I kind of come from a like like a quasi spiritual place, or thinking a lot of the ways in which like religious practice is also about a type of a feeling of both separation and belonging, that space indicates to us what is the most sort of important or the most uh, sacred elements of the room. And so getting people to behave in such a way that like both there's a levity and with the cheapness of all the materials, but also there's a uh this like heightened, more like, I don't know, like an elevated uh experience of the kind of cheapness. uh and so then I started using like these big black curtains with different LED lights, really honing that experience into a like more explicit uh, form of the experience where it becomes much more obvious the the kind of emotional weight of the rooms that people are supposed to encounter. But by the end of it, I kind of trying to find that balance. This is my grad school thesis that was essentially like a giant paper lantern that had motion sensors aligned around it. So as you walked around it, it talked back to you. And so thinking about that, like interaction and recognition, changing our sense of either being in a space or being a part of a space. And even though that's a kind of like, it's such a small difference, but it becomes like hugely important when it's actually felt. And it being such a matter of perspective in that way. Uh, and so it's another photo. Uh, this one shot on like 35 millimeter. But wanting it to have that kind of like grand scale and with a presence that felt trying to not say like reciprocal, but it's like this kind of acknowledgement being in the room with you, uh, but it being otherworldly, it being a type of other, but not, but one that is sort of like with an open hand gesture. And so, and then another uh, plastic curtains piece. This one incorporating different blacklight elements and video pieces to sort of be more like almost like more full room stationary, um, which leads me to this, the video portion. And so I've got a number of videos to talk about. I don't know if stop and answer questions about the installation or not. Otherwise, I'd just keep moving along. Got some videos to show.
Yeah, I think we can keep moving on. I was going to ask you, well, shoot, kind of the same thing when we got to the end of the architecture, kind of like relating that back to the portraiture. And you made that like really clear in a cool way. But like now I'm seeing a lot of connections from the architecture to the installation work, where it has a kind of a similar visual discourse, but then I feel like the concept is really different, especially that question of like being in a space or being a part of the space. I do think like socially that's huge. When you look at especially how you photograph your installation work and how you photographed architecture in the past, like there's a common visual language happening. But I feel like the goal, I guess it is still along that same trajectory. Do you ever feel like your works slip into like a psychic alienation realm instead of like the relational come be a part of this space?
Yeah, it's
Like, is
one of the
this,
problem.
yeah,
It's
is
one
your
of the
work ever
problems
like
of
the
like
parking lot
the
shot, I guess?
like not having the sound makes it difficult because I do think that the sensorial element helps bring out connections, but I mean, I do think that there is something about them that is also like, and this is the problem of like just being able to section off any piece of built environment and say that like this is now like art, that it is the act of installation inherently necessitates like a type of separation or like distance, um, and that gets the bridge has the ability to be like restored, I think, but the way that you do that changes the where you're going, I guess, because you could restore it in the sense of like you make it totally spectacular, like a kind of on the worst end, something like one of these Instagram style spectacle installations that are just like there for a photo opportunity, like the most kind of like hedonistic element of like self-indulgence, uh, and it restores that kind of connection, but in a totally like uh, in a way that like reinforces like a type of solipsism. It's now space that no longer exists communally or like for some sort of higher recognition or purpose, but totally for like just reinforcement of self. Um,
Yeah, yeah, totally.
and I think that, and that's not a thing that, uh, it's like you could even mean the opposite of that, like something like a Yayoi Kusama um, infinity room, but then it becomes that because of the way that you've built that connection. Like the infinity rooms, you only get like 30 seconds in each of them, and everybody just uses it to take a photo of themselves in the infinity room. The feeling of the whatever type of sublime that you're supposed to get from the experience is totally like been evaporated by its popularity and its presence. But then you have something like certain James Turrell kind of rooms or like the evening light shows that he has at certain places, and I think they have the spectacular nature, but there's also because they're very unaccommodating in a lot of respects. You don't slip into the same type of like um, fantastical relationship, the totally like self-reflecting one. Unless you're in the Prada store, obviously.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you, Quinton.
So yeah. I hope that any of this is making sense. I don't know. Oh yes, so video works. So I think I'm gonna start here because this was one of the earliest video works, not the earliest, I don't think, but I made this at the very beginning of the pandemic because I was in, uh, after devoting so much of my time to taking studio portraits and then there being no studio to go to anymore. I started working with feedback loops using cameras, looking into TV screens um, to create generated like auto loops. And so this is one of the first sort of major video experiments with that method. Yeah, so that video is called Screen as a Mirror, Screen as a Mirror. And I think that that's a big part of my approach to my video work has just been the way in which the camera processing the image acts a lot the way that the kind of psychological process of how we come to imagine ourselves can be, that the camera looking in itself or looking at this the screen, which is the representation of itself, sees nothing and thus has to create something uh, in that reflex. Uh, and that becomes like, skip to the next one. And so that idea turns into this idea that is expressed in this video flood. Um, and it being about less about consciousness and self-creation, but maybe just the way in which, like, exploring that classic metaphor of the stream or surfing, all of these ways that we envision, like water and its movement, its like flow, uh, to be like information, and using video as a way to like express, or corruption of video to express that tangible reality, that failure. It is not this kind of like totally natural like process, but it has texture. It is not just a seamless like outside thing that we can't touch. Let's watch a little bit of this. These videos are all like 10 to 15 minutes long, so like taking this much out of them, it's like it's killer's me just a little bit, honestly. But
And I noticed you made smaller selections for the presentation today. Yeah, that's tough.
uh yeah, yeah. So I think in a weird way, these all like a number of these videos, or the ones that I've shown up to this point, they all kind of fall into, I think, the same overall series. Um, they're really, and I think becomes encapsulated in this piece, that is during the pandemic, I got really into watching YouTube, like influencers, especially like meditation and or like guided meditation, spiritual kind of new agey, um, like influencers who are doing, I'm not going to call them skims because I think people do genuinely get a lot of uh, help or they feel connected in a certain way. But there is a type of insularness that I think that that creates in this way that I wanted to explore the possibility of like, rather than it being like meditation, is this way to like knowing oneself. Like, what if we imagine the opposite, but still make it kind of robotic in this way that I feel like the formula, the algorithm formats so much of this content. And so that all kind of became consolidated in this work right here. You watch a little bit of.
Oh, these little snippets are such incredible teases.
You'll have to watch it to find out what happens next.
These are these viewable on your website?
They're all on my website or on YouTube. YouTube is the best friend of the just the anonymous video artist.
Yeah.
Also, when you got your work up on YouTube, you never have to worry about getting it to a gallery in a lot of respects.
True.
It's really their problem after that.
Maybe I'm gonna cut you off in like 5 minutes.
Okay. All right. And we'll watch this last one and we'll skip the final video that I have because I think this is more relevant to our conversations from earlier. Oh wait, I should preface this. So this is called Screen Test, which is an allusion to Andy Warhol's Screen Test. But also I made this in a strange way. It's very much my love letter to David Cronenberg's Videodrome as well as to Andy Warhol. So we'll skip over it. Okay, I'm done.
The end.
The
Oh man,
end.
I like that piece that we had to skip too.
I know.
Um, that's my first time seeing Screen Test, actually.
I think it is, yes. That's why I knew I had to change it up a little bit.
Nice. um, we're a little tight on time, but Spencer, do you have any
Mhm.
questions or comments for Quinton?
Um, I don't think so, but I would say that was great. I always love seeing
Thank
different
you.
perspective, another photographer. I think it's fun, and that was really cool. And I appreciate you still using film. Not a lot of
Oh
people do
yeah.
it these days. It's starting to make a comeback a little, but I think it's cool.
It's the best way. I'm
It
going
really is.
to a film. I'm going to a film screening tomorrow that is a 35 millimeter projection print of like an old black and white Japanese movie. So can't wait.
Sounds exciting.
Um, tying it is wow. Trying to think about like all the stuff we just saw, little snippets of. It's hard to talk about a piece when we see just like a little tease of it, but
Wow.
it still feels very much in line with that kind of critique of the psychic alienation. Um,
I think it's
how
just moved from both the built environment to now the world that we carry around with us in our phone.
yeah,
But it's like we do it to ourselves, and that makes it just so much more uh, both ubiquitous and hard to see.
yeah, I like that. It's in like we do it to ourselves. God, that's dark. um that
That's
first
Radiohead.
Yeah, that's right. It is verbatim. Um, I guess I don't own that phrase, but sure. Um, that first video piece you showed us. Okay, so a thing that I've kind of been curious about with your work is that the portraits feel so. I hate that I'm going to use this word, but they feel so loving. Like there's so much care for the sitter. There's so much like not even just care for the sitter, but I feel like there's like love for love, right? Like giving like let love live or whatever, right? It just feels so optimistic on the human side of things. Like, look at this person. It's marvelous that they're alive and that they have a life. It's very empathetic. And then
Mhm.
we swing over to this architecture stuff that's like corporations are the soul sucking demons of life. It's an antithetical almost, right? Like this, especially like the parking lot shot. I really like that where it's like cold,
Mhm.
numeric. That I feel like is like this huge sort of other side of the coin to that like the loving embrace of the lens. um, so the first video piece I feel like kind of still straddles that like it can be very positive. It can be very like fall into this space and feel whatever you need to feel kind of. But then I feel like the later pieces are definitely more like I almost said like why do you have to be so negative, Quinton? um, but how do you feel like explain that I guess in in 2 minutes or whatever explain that impulse in your work like that you have this
Mhm.
like huge I feel like you're like you really want the human race to win kind of thing um but then you very much acknowledge like what we're up against especially from a capital point of view like
Mhm.
do you when you make work is it okay that it's like really kind of pointing at it's like the bummer that society is or do you long to make work that like it's wow it's very romanticized like connecting with other humans I'm not exactly sure what I want to ask but like how do you as a single person like feel about making work that lands on sort of that spectrum and do you wish that you could make work that like feels more positive versus more critical maybe that's what I'm trying to
I mean,
yeah
being somebody who does so much more conceptually focused work, it's a lot easier. to make work that is negative than optimistic. There's always it's criticism when you're doing negative criticism, it's just so much easier than positive criticism in so many respects.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
because I mean, it would be uh, very disingenuous to be like, we got this one in the bag, humans rule. Because I don't think that is I don't believe that anything is ever settled until it's already happened. And so um so from that perspective, I think a lot of, and there are other video works that I didn't show, but a lot more of the kind of ambient, more new agey pieces definitely have this kind of, that they're much more kind of serene and open. Uh, like I wanted to make something that was just these very like, even though they are can sometimes be visually noisy, like very quiet moments in a particular way. But I'm also just so into new age and minimalist ambient music. But and that's where that stuff kind of thrives. Uh, Whereas the expressions that become like much more technophobic and kind of technocritical are about misrecognizing the world, uh, in that the only way to actually address the problems that we have is to see the actual thing that is creating them, or to reckon with the reality of things. And the screen is always this just like eternal mediation of all things that is like a it is its own type of like psychological structure that creates these new barriers, new forms of like repression, and like repression in like a Freudian sense, or like a kind of um, like it's like a new type of governor that is both like unrestrained id in its potential, but also just this uh like it is super egoic in its constant surveillance of us and its truth, or its like shame-based kind of deconstruction of whatever self-esteem or like experience connectivity that we might otherwise not experience. And so I think staying vigilant becomes such a part of that for me. And so
I'm excited. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, I'm excited for you to start making work about the Apple Vision Pro.
oh boy, I don't know. It's like there, I watched a horror short where somebody put on one of those Oculus Rifts and it melted their the front of their face off. And I was like, I really have nothing left to say about this.
That's true. There you go. It's done. Yeah, it's pretty good. We have 30 seconds. Basically, you mentioned being attracted to certain types of music, and I just wanted to, put a shout out for your noise and drone work that you didn't talk about at all here. But can you just pull up your Bandcamp real quick, share your screen, and just talk to us for like 2 seconds about how that exists? And is that entirely separate? I mean, I hear your work in your video works, like your music work in your video works, your sound works there.
Mm-hmm.
Are they just another channel? Does it feel like a different manifestation? I mean, it kind of operates under a different name. How do you say that name, by the way?
Bathroom.
Bathum. Okay.
So yes, this is my music. I think the music thing is just a space to definitely explore things. Like I get lots of recordings, some of them make it into art, some of them become this. some of them get to be double dip because that's your prerogative as an artist sometimes. Uh, yeah, and I mean, I think it's just one of those things where being in Bellingham, they had just such a good noise scene when I was there that you would think that art and noise would have a lot of overlapping people, but you'd be wrong. Most people who are in art institutions find noise music to be despicable. So
Yeah, they get
I
it's
was just
really
like,
cagey,
fine,
those two worlds.
I'm just gonna keep doing my own thing and just keeping toes in both ponds.
Yeah. Yeah, the noise folks seem like really anti-institution, rightly so, and then the art folks seem kind of ivory towerish about it.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Well,
it's
cool.
because they have terrible tastes and they think it sucks, so it's got to be good, right?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. Thank you for letting me pull that out of you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Cool. Before we let Quinton go, Spencer, any last questions or even about living in New York?
Yeah,
I
come to
don't
New York.
think
It's
so,
cool.
but I mean, I guess I'll ask this: how's New York? I've just heard so many
Nice.
crazy things there.
New York
There's
is
like
sick.
flooding not that long ago, but
Oh my God. Yeah, that was crazy. All I can say is fuck Eric Adams. Get him out of here. So every town, every place thinks that they have the worst mayor, but this time I think it might be true. Uh, but yeah, New York is awesome. I think it's important. I think the difference is that like West Coast mindset, you're in the Pacific Northwest, which is probably one of the most passive aggressive places on earth because it has the manifest destiny ideology of being like, I don't ever have to deal with anybody because population density doesn't exist to me, basically. And so you can always just get up and go somewhere else. And here, there's just nowhere else to go. There's more people that live in probably on my block here in Astoria than live in most neighborhoods, I think, in certain sections of Bellingham. And it's like Queens is the most diverse place on the entire world. So it's like you can really literally just turn a corner and it's nothing like you've ever seen.
That's awesome. Well, cool. Quinton, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Spencer, thank you so much for your time
My
today.
pleasure. Thank you, Spencer. I very much
Well, thank you for
appreciate you
having
coming
me.
out.
Yeah, and cool. Quinton, I will send you the screen recording, and yeah, thank you again. Really appreciate it. Thank you, thank you,
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank
I'll
you.
send you the audio. Have a good night, y'all.
Yep. See you,
You too.
Spencer.
Bye.
Peace.